The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, a big row broke out this morning, and it was all about Cadbury's and the National Trust, who on dozens of National Trust sites have Easter egg hunts on Easter Sunday morning. They're very popular, but the branding for this year's events didn't actually mention the word Easter. It said it was an egg hunt. Although, in their defence, the National Trust and Cadbury say, look at their website, where the word Easter was mentioned regularly. But this upset people, and very early this morning, the Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, piled in. And surprisingly, perhaps, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, whilst in Saudi Arabia, she piled into this row too. This is what the Prime Minister said.
Well, I'm not just a vicar's daughter, I'm a member of the National Trust as well. I think the stance they've taken is absolutely ridiculous, and I don't know what they're thinking about, frankly. Easter's very important. It's important to me. It's a very important festival for the Christian faith, for millions across the world. So I think what the National Trust is doing is frankly just ridiculous.
Well, strong stuff from the Prime Minister. But does that reaction, that very quick reaction from both the Archbishop of York and the Prime Minister, does it tell us something? Does it tell us that the Christian faith feel under threat from an increasingly secular society? I'd like your view on that. I wonder, does it matter? Perhaps you couldn't care less. I have to say, I did make a comment on this morning, but it's a comment I've made many times over the last few years. And my comment is less about Christianity, but more perhaps about Christian culture. And we do, it seems to me, live in a country that has a Judeo-Christian culture. My view is it should be protected. I'm not for us becoming a wholly secular society, but I'm guessing this is something that's going to raise very strong emotions among LBC listeners and callers. So please, let me know if you think Christianity is under attack. Call 0345 60 60 973. If you think Mrs. May's completely overreacted, then text me on 84850. If you think Christianity is so embedded in our British values that it'll never be erased, then you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, you can watch us live on the Facebook page and comment there too. So I wonder, are Christians really scared that secularism is beginning to take over? I'm going to go first this evening to Eileen in Waltham Forest. Good evening, Eileen.
Hello, Nigel. Well, I'm glad you brought up this topic because I feel very strongly about it. Yeah. I'm an atheist. I was brought up as a Christian. But, you see, when I think about it, most wars are caused by religion. I don't believe in fairies at the bottom of my garden. I believe in compassion to people and to animals and to all living things. I'm an atheist and proud of it.
Well, that's fine. You're an atheist and proud of it. But equally, I mean, Easter is Easter, isn't it? And whether you're Christian or whether you're atheist, we should still call it Easter, shouldn't we?
Well, words don't really matter in that way to me, but it's just this, people expect you to have a religion. I know friends who expect me to have a religion. Well, I was once, because I had to be as a child. I'm not a child anymore, and I can use my own mind. I'm a thinker.
No, I get that, Eileen. So when it comes to the census or it comes to renewing a passport,
yes.
under the box that says religion, you put atheist, do you?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, Eileen. I mean, there are clearly a lot of people like you. Yet, what is perhaps surprising is that there are 33 million people who identify as being Christian. They put down C of E or the Catholic Church or whatever it is. And yet the truth of it, Eileen, is hardly any of them now actually go to church. So anyway, you're not bothered. It doesn't worry you in the least. And if we become a secular society, you'd be happier, yeah?
Can I just say this before you go? Most wars are because of religion.
Well, many wars use religion as an excuse, and certainly religion's been guilty for a few of them over the years. I don't think all of them, but Eileen, I get your point. Clear as a bell. Chris, in Whitehaven, are Christians under attack from secularism?
I think that the National Secular Society has overreacted, to be quite honest. I mean, I'm an atheist myself.
Yep.
I used to be, I'm a years old at the moment, but I used to be a bit of a Richard Dawkins fanatic, and quite strongly passionate about promoting atheism. I don't think it's really something that needs to be promoted anymore, personally. I think there was a lot of battles going on, perhaps, in the country not so long ago, where Christianity or certain groups within the Christian faith were attacking values that I think are quite liberal values that someone like Churchill would have promoted, like gay rights and the gay marriage thing. I can't remember where you stand on it or where you stood on it, but I was pro equal rights for gay people to be married in this country, and I think Churchill, if he'd have lived within this time frame, quite possibly would have been too.
Chris, let's just be fair. There are a lot of Christians who object in principle to gay marriage. Equally, there are a lot of Christians who are quite relaxed about it. But my question to you, as somebody who has been an atheist activist from the sounds of it, okay, fair dues. But I mean, do you object to the fact that we do live in a Christian country, don't we?
I think we've got the Lord spiritual, so I don't think we live in a secular country per se, but I think the country has secular values. I mean, and that doesn't mean that it's not a Christian country. It doesn't mean it's not a secular country, in my eyes. It means that it's a live and let live country, in my eyes, and I'd like it to be that way. I mean, if you look at America at the moment, there was the case with the bakery. Now, I was fully... I'm sure you know about what happened with the bakery.
This is the Northern Ireland case, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, I think it was in Northern Ireland, not America, where
it was.
To make a cake.
Yeah,
well, it was just a little business, wasn't it? It was a little, family-owned business. And I think that sometimes, there's been cases in the past where forms of what some people might call militant action might have been justified, but sometimes I think militant action can be, quite obviously bullying.
Now, I get the live and let live point that you make, Chris. Quick question for you: are the Ten Commandments still a fairly good rule of thumb by how we should live in society?
Not all of them, I don't think. I think if you read all of them, I mean, there's some very good ones in there, So,
the point,
in my personal view, not all of them, but there are some very, very good ones, and I mean, I wouldn't like to force my views on anyone. I don't think people should. I think, I just think we live in a country where most people just have the general attitude where we should just live and let live. And I think if our Prime Minister is Christian...
Yeah, she is.
Of course she is, She's just said God is a driving force. And I think God can be a positive driving force as well as a negative driving force. It depends on the person who interprets the faith.
Well, Chris, I thank you. We've had two strong atheist callers so far. We're going to Dartford next to David. David, where do you stand on this issue?
Well, a couple of things, Nigel. Number one, I was at Cadbury Well today, stocking up on all my special edition Easter eggs.
Right.
And basically, Happy Easter was plastered over all of their hand-decorated Easter eggs.
Yeah,
and it was everywhere. But the thing about Theresa May, I only wish we had a strong Prime Minister who was able to stand up at the time that Cadbury, a jewel of our British industry, was sold to an American cheese company. But never mind. What I wanted to say as well is that I do find that, I live in a Christian country. I was born into a Christian country, and it does depress me sometimes when I sort of see that every little by little it's being chipped away at. So, my kids, they learn more about Happy Diwali in the primary school.
Yeah, I know they do.
They do about the crucifixion. And I just think, and the next thing is that Merry Christmas is disappearing because it's being called Happy Holidays.
Or Winterville, or whatever it may be. No, I mean, your point about Cadbury is a good one. I mean, I think we could call this a confected row, could we not? because, you know, actually, no, but the truth is, Easter was all over the other side of the poster. But I think what is interesting, David, is that the Prime Minister, who's on a visit to Saudi Arabia, who I think in this case was given partial information, but reacted very quickly and very strongly to it, as you heard in that clip. And I think, you know, you talk about the chipping away. I think that people of strong religious faith actually are beginning to feel somewhat undermined in their own country, and they see the march of secularism moving everywhere. And I think it was Birmingham City Council, David, a few years ago, who, rather than calling it Christmas, called it Winterval. Now, you know, I wonder whether, and I'd love to hear from some atheists who tell me that they think Winterval's great and the word Easter should be banned. But, David, you're obviously worried about that chipping away.
Well, I am, and I also feel, you know, Christmas is one of my favourite times of year. I also find that the sort of attitude of the retail sector in general doesn't help matters because, you know, the sort of Christmas stuff comes out in the shops earlier every year. Sainsbury's have got all their stuff out in September, and I tell you what, I go down to the Sainsbury's in Crayford, and you know, all of the Christmas stuff has now disappeared from the shelves on the 20th of December last year and replaced by sales stuff.
Wow.
And you know, the first day of Christmas is Christmas Day. It's supposed to go on 12 days after that, isn't it?
David, it's no use to me. I've never gone Christmas shopping before midday on Christmas Eve. So if the shops are cleared out, I'm in real trouble. David, I thank you for both the points you make. I'm going to go quickly to Pauline in Bethnal Green. Pauline, is Christianity under attack from secularism?
Hi, Nigel. Well, first of all, I say that I'm an atheist, but I was raised as a Christian. So although I've chosen to reject all the beliefs, I nevertheless have a lot of respect for the religion and for the good that it does in the world, including in this country. But for me, I think that attacking Christianity is become acceptable in this country. And I find that Christianity is attacked by liberals, by feminists, by gays, by atheists, even by comedians. Nowadays, everyone says it's all free speech, and that includes the freedom to offend Christians. But all of that changes when it's other religions in this country. Suddenly, it's not allowed, it's not accepted to criticize them or to laugh at them or to try to take things back a bit instead of them being so intense in their beliefs. Suddenly, if you try and do that, then you're labelled xenophobic or Islamophobic. You know, I mean, if you remember that, I thought it was an appalling case where there was a Christian bakery in the UK, and a gay couple had gone into the bakery and they'd asked them to bake a cake to celebrate their gay union, and the bakers refused because it went against their religious beliefs, and the gay couple took them to court, and the Christian bakery lost. And I thought that was really unfair because if that had been a Muslim bakery...
agree more. Oh, goodness
if
me.
If those gays went to a Muslim bakery, they would have been kicked out.
Yeah. Pauline, I think as an atheist, you've made the point beautifully, and I absolutely agree with you. I think that if we're going to give rights to all sorts of different groups and we're going to live in a tolerant society, tolerance is a two-way street. And I do actually think that people of strong Christian faith are being beaten down from all sides by everybody, and they're not getting a very fair, rub of the green, quite frankly. So, Pauline, I'm with you 100%. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. It's 7:15. So it's a big row. Easter Sunday, Cadbury's in association with the National Trust are going to have about 4 dozen egg hunts, or are they Easter egg hunts? And no one quite knows. And Jane McGrath on Facebook rather sums it up. She says, faith is an individual thing, and no one has the right to stop any other individual from believing. The Cadbury thing is a mountain from a molehill. Read the website. Well, Jane, you're right. You read the website, and actually, both on Cadbury and on the National Trust, it mentions Easter many, many times. But it's the reaction that it sparked, isn't it, that is really, really interesting. And the Prime Minister absolutely piled in. And I do think that there are many people of strong religious faith who do feel under attack from all sides. And it's almost as if some minorities are equal, but some other minorities are more equal than others. And people are feeling that. A point here just to throw in, that actually we are a Christian country, whether listeners you like it or not. We have a Christian constitution. I'm speaking to you from France, which of course is a secular state, but we have a Christian state, the Queen, of course, being defender of the faith and the head of our national church, the Church of England. So secularists out there, if you really want to move us to being a secular society, we will need to change our constitution, and whoever succeeds the Queen, whenever that's going to be, would have to take a very different oath indeed. Brett Damerel on Facebook says, religion is about control, always has been and always will be. Charlie Mason says, all religion is wrong. And Dom Mangle says, Easter has nothing to do with Christianity. Well, Dom, I think you're right. I think there was an earlier pagan festival that kind of got adopted. But I've heard from more atheists than Christians so far. If you are a Christian, a practicing Christian out there, and you feel somewhat under attack, you've been told at work perhaps you can't wear the cross, or whatever else it may be, do let me know. I'm asking people, is this reaction from the Prime Minister, does it show us that Christians feel secularism is on the march in the UK? And I'm going to ask that very question to Rebecca in Horsham. Good evening, Rebecca.
Hello, hi. I was just going to make the point that actually it was originally a pagan festival named after the pagan god Easter, and it all just seems that the Christians have got all that cool stuff that they do, egg hunting, rabbits, signs of fertility, and have just jumped on it to make the Easter festival loosely based around the fact that the egg might be a tomb, sign of new life, which I think is pretty rubbish, actually. And actually, if you look at the website, it's one page didn't have the word Easter in it.
I know.
It's crazy, and I'm actually quite disappointed that the Prime Minister didn't have a stance on any other terrible news things that have been happening recently, and she seems to be struck on this idea of Easter and chocolate. I just think it's a slight shame. I think for me, it shows that her priorities are quite not in the right place, to be honest.
Well, she is a vicar's daughter, Rebecca. She is a strong practicing Christian. She goes to church every Sunday, which is more than most of us do. In fact, church numbers are falling rapidly. It's quite funny that even though 30 million of us, 33 million of us identify as being Christian, actually church attendances at Christian ceremonies on Sunday have fallen now well below 1 million. Roughly 750,000 people go to church every Sunday. And a lot of us who were brought up as Christians, I'm one, perhaps I do go once or twice a year, but it's normally, to be honest, to a christening or to a funeral or to a wedding. We've got this odd situation, Rebecca, where we identify as being Christian, and yet we don't actually practice. I mean, you presumably, from what you're saying, take an atheistic point of view, do you?
I don't identify myself as a Christian. I was brought up a Christian and have therefore decided that with balance and reason and science, that it definitely doesn't fit with us and our family. And I don't expect my feelings to be thrown down anyone else's throat. And I think if you want to celebrate Easter as a Christian festival, then you can go ahead and do it. But don't equally make everyone else celebrate it as you feel that you should.
So, Rebecca, you're not really fazed by this at all, are you?
Not really. I just think it's a massive storm in a teacup, and there are more things going on that people need to be aware of, really.
Rebecca from Horsham, point taken, absolutely. Tony in Hatfield, are you a Christian that feels under attack?
I'm a Christian, but I don't feel under attack. I'm strong in my belief, Nigel, so I don't feel my trust is not in man, it's in God. But I just want to make a point. Someone said earlier that I'm a thinker, I'm an atheist. Well, in the Encyclopedia of Wars, it shows that the percentage of wars caused by religion, that includes all religion, is 7%. The rest is other people. So the idea that religion causes all wars is a complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Also, Nigel, I'm 70 this year, so I was a young person in the 50s and 60s, and I've seen society go downhill. Under Christianity, we were a very free nation. Today, you can't say anything, and closing down. Cultural Marxism is closing us down, and we can't say anything about anything. And I don't believe in going deliberately insulting somebody, but I think it's ridiculous when you can't.
So, Tony,
say certain things, and you're called a name because you don't agree with a certain behaviour. I mean, it's.
Well, Tony, we started this conversation with me asking you whether you felt under attack, and actually, as this conversation's gone on, you've rather confirmed it, really, haven't you? I mean, are you now scared, as the strong Christian that you are, to speak your mind?
Well, no, as a Christian, I don't believe that one goes out pointing other people's faults, because we're all sinners. We all have a problem. None of us are perfect. So I don't go around. To me, it's a personal thing. A person lives a certain way. I'm not his judge. It's not my business to know what other people do. If they want to live a certain lifestyle, I don't agree with it, but it's not my fault. He has a judge, and I believe it's the great God.
Okay.
So if people live a certain way, they pay the consequences. That's all. But I certainly don't judge people at all. No, I don't think Christians should judge people because we're all human. We all come under the blood of Jesus Christ. It's in John 3:16 said, God so loved the world. For all mankind,
Tony, some will agree with that. That's going a bit further than I would, but thank you very much. Your texts and tweets. Yes, I do believe Christianity is being deliberately eroded in this country, and I've noticed this a lot in the entertainment media for years now, says James. Hi, Nigel. John from Bromley says, Easter is not even a Christian word. It's not in the Bible. It's pagan. It comes from Esther, the goddess of spring, so the National Trust may have offended the pagans. Well done. Hi, Nigel. Yes, Christians are under attack. I went to school in the 70s. We had assembly, the Lord's Prayer, Christian hymns. It's all been slowly withdrawn over the years. Our children know nothing now. It's scandalous, says Jules in Manchester. Have to say, Jules, I'm with you on that. I was at school in the 70s, and yeah, we did have Christian assemblies a couple of times a week. Those of other religions were spared that and went to their own denominations or waited outside the room. And yeah, we sang hymns, and that's the way we were brought up. And whether we accepted it or rejected it, given that we are, and I keep saying this because I'm going to get some of you on screaming at me at some point, but given that actually we are a Christian country, because it's there, it's part of our constitution, I personally think that kids should be brought up that way, and then they can make up their own minds. Right, our next caller, and I'm going to ask Stephen in Chester. Stephen, are you a Christian who's under attack?
I am a Christian, but I'm not under attack, or at least I don't feel I'm under attack. I went to university in England, and still live in England actually, and had classmates and people that I lived with from all varying religions, and all of them would celebrate the Christian festivals and the Christian things with us. And I think mainly it came down to more a social event than a religious event. Like Easter, my daughter goes to a Catholic school, and I'd be very surprised if she could tell you what Easter is other than a day where she gets eggs.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't often agree with Jeremy Corbyn, but he did talk about Easter being over-commercialised, and certainly Christmas is massively over-commercialised. So I do take that point, Stephen. But it's interesting, isn't it? The Prime Minister reacted very strongly and very quickly to this. I think that shows that she feels that the country she grew up in, the values that she believes in, somehow are under attack from secularism. And it's difficult not to think, whether you agree with it or not, difficult not to think that actually there is some truth in that, surely.
They're under attack by retailers. They're not under attack by the average person in the street. I'll tell you, I worked with people from all over the world. I work very international thing, and I never, ever have any comments about any religion. It's a retail-driven change, and the main reason they want Easter gone out of Easter eggs, because then other religions will actively go out and buy them. The reason they want Christmas out, so then Jewish kids and Islamic kids, or Islamic's probably the wrong word, but Jewish kids and Muslim kids can be brought into that holiday as well. It's a commercial thing that they've made that reason. It's not an attack on a religion. It's just a way of getting more.
God, you are so cynical, Stephen. You really are. I thank you very much for your call. I got a lovely... It's always Twitter, isn't it? I'm pretty sure there are events and decorations for Easter and Christmas every year. Wind your neck in. It's always on Twitter. They have a go at me. Look, no one is saying there aren't. But I asked the question, why did Birmingham City Council a few years ago say Happy Winterval? What are they scared of? What are they trying to promote? I don't know. Maybe you do. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg at 7:30, and time for the news with Rupert Buttier. It's the great egg hunt row, or is it an Easter egg hunt row? And everybody's wading in, from archbishops to the Prime Minister. Actually, when you read the websites of the National Trust and Cadbury's, they mention Easter lots of times. So it is a bit of a storm in a teacup, but I think it is true that there are many people of strong Christian faith who feel that secularism is on the march and that they're actually being attacked from all sides. But the Prime Minister made these comments from Saudi Arabia, and I just want to have a quick word about that. Why is she in Saudi Arabia? Well, she insists that she's there because it's in the national interest. And yeah, it's certainly true that we do sell arms to Saudi Arabia. But there's a slight problem, isn't there, in Saudi Arabia? We call it human rights, but I think actually we probably ought to call it women's rights, to be more specific. You know, women, for example, banned from driving cars in Riyadh and places like that. The Prime Minister says that she hopes to inspire oppressed women in the state, but I don't really see how she can inspire oppressed women when actually it's the law that forbids them from leading a normal life. And actually, can I just say this? This is not just about human rights. This actually is about something more fundamental. It's about the fact that Saudi Arabia have been funding Wahhabism, the most extreme form of Islam, and it's that that has led to many of the bad mosques in Britain and Germany and elsewhere. And when it comes to the crisis in Syria, Saudi Arabia have not taken a single refugee, a single person, you know, fleeing that area because they say it could undermine their society, and yet they're happy to fund all kinds of extremism in our countries. And I would just say to Mrs. May, I get it, trade is important, but I think personally there are many other places I'd have chosen to go before going to Saudi Arabia. There we are. Lorraine on Facebook says, Happy Easter. Enjoy your chocolate Easter eggs over the Easter holidays. It's a joyful tradition, so the offended and miseries can go cry in a darkened room for all I care. Robert Price says, it is not under threat, meaning Christianity. It is, however, at risk of being rendered irrelevant by the pervasive laws of nature and scientific knowledge. This is not a problem in my eyes. Well, Richard Dawkins, I think, would probably agree with that. And Azukina says, respect our Christianity. So we're beginning to get some slightly stronger messages coming through here. And I'm going to go to Hillary in Ewell and ask her whether she thinks secularism is on the march.
Yes, I think we're being attacked. When I'm a Christian, I'm sort of in my 80s and I've always been a Christian all my life.
Yep.
And I think particularly in our church in Ewell Village, you know, we have congregations on Sundays that, well, I haven't had it because I've had an accident over the last 12 months. But I mean, you know, sort of babies in arms right up to 100-year-olds.
But
and
generally,
generally,
Hillary, generally, younger people are not really attending Christian services in big numbers, are they?
Well, they are in our church.
Are they? Okay.
Yes.
And,
you know, come down to Ewell one day.
Well, that's a lovely offer. Thank you. And tell me, what kind of service is it? Is it a traditional service? Is it a more evangelical service? What is it that gets people there?
Yeah, well, it's the C of E, and we have different services on a Sunday, right?
Yeah.
We have, we have an 8 o'clock Holy Communion in the morning, said, and then there's song Eucharist at 9:30, and there's a beautiful choir, and it's really lovely, you know. We're not high church as such. We don't burn the incense and that, but it's a beautiful church, old church. And then at 11 o'clock, it varies from week to week, but we have a wonderful thing on one of the Sundays, which is called Toddle Up, which is all the little kids.
Very good. Well, it sounds,
and
Hillary.
I go to my 9:30, and then I go back at 11 on that Sunday to go to the Toddle Up, and I'm stamping around and doing things, and it's great, you know. And I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's families and it's wonderful, you know.
Well, I used to see that, you know, in areas where I've lived. I've seen that, but I'm not so sure I'd see it today. So I think, Hillary, you've clearly got a very good church and a very good vicar, and it's working. But I would say this to you, across the whole country, despite the fact we identify 33 million of us as being Christian on our passports, etc., fewer than 1 million of us are going to services on a Sunday. Hillary, I thank you. Daniel in Oxford, is secularism on the march, Daniel?
Well, I don't know what the last lady was on about, but, I mean, I'm from Oxford. I went to school in Oxford, not too long ago either, and I was one of about 3 Christians in a school of about 2,000. Probably about a third of the school were Muslim, and the rest were basically non-believers. I'm now at the University of Reading, where I'd say I've met about 15 Christians while being there, and also I was the editor of the student newspaper there, and I resigned from that because of a number of things, including censorship, but also because one of the people said basically that religion has no place in the newspaper. And what they specifically meant was Christianity. So yeah, I don't think Christianity is being destroyed. I think it's dead. I don't think anyone of my generation believes in it anymore.
Well, Hillary, I mean, Hillary, who's in her 80s, just from Ewell, just rang in to say her church is buzzing. So it's clearly not dying everywhere, is it?
Well, I don't know. I think if you, in one area, most of the students will go to probably one or two churches in that area. So you're going to get some churches that have a lot of students there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there are a lot of young people who do actually believe in it. From my experience, I go to a church where there's a fair number of young Christians, but if you go to a university, compared to the majority of young people, there are hardly any of them. It's just that when you go to a church, believe it or not, you find people who are Christians.
But could it be, Daniel, could it be that actually people are Christian, but they don't choose to go to church every Sunday? They choose to practice Christianity in their own rather more private way.
Possibly, but I mean, I talk to people as well, and I rarely come across people who are nominally Christian. Most people, in fact, all the people except for one I live with are non-believers. Everyone I know, I don't know a single person in my lectures or seminars except for two who are Christians and would say they're Christians. Most people just are just not Christian anymore.
Yeah, Daniel, I've done my best.
Christian backgrounds, but
I've done my best. I've done my best, Daniel, with you to play devil's advocate, but I can't get away from it. You're right. There are clearly fewer young people who believe strongly in religion or who are attending church. You are undeniably, absolutely correct with that point. And whether that's because of the march of secularism or just a different attitude towards the world, I don't know. Daniel, I thank you. I'm going to ask Neil in Watford Gap. Neil, are you a Christian, Neil?
I'm a Christian, Nigel. I've been a Christian 40 years, and I believe the church is very much under attack at the moment, and I believe public enemy number one is political correctness. And you're probably aware that in the 1920s, the Marxists weren't doing very well, so they needed to introduce a form of cultural Marxism, where they basically wanted to take over the language, they wanted to demonise and attack those who didn't subscribe to the narrative, they wanted to negate and distort the difference between sexes, ethnic groups, cultures, they wanted to distort and break what I would call godly personal relationships, family, marriage, fatherhood, the male role. And basically what we now see is we've basically got a very small, powerful humanist elite who basically want to legislate and control speech, actions and thought. And it comes, I mean, we've seen it today through the National Trust, for example, so them sort of playing down the Easter message, although
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not actually sure about that, to be honest. But your general point, I think is very, very strong. It's interesting, isn't it? There's quite often, whenever we have these sort of debates, the National Secular Society appear, and they seem to get acres of news coverage on the BBC, on their Almost a Day programme, or on the news, or whatever it is. And I wonder, I wonder how many members the National Secular Society has. Is it 3, or am I missing something? Are they really quite big? Your point, though, Neil, that a relatively small number of people within the liberal media establishment can change a national conversation, I don't think applies just to religion. I think it applies to a lot of other issues too. Do you feel, Neil, as somebody who for 40 years has been a Christian, do you feel rather more nervous about speaking your mind in public than you would have done a few years ago?
Yeah, well, what I was going to say was, in 2015, the church in this country had 5 million members. Now, I don't know what that is in terms of percentage, but it must be 7 or 8% of the population of this country. Now, what you're seeing is very much a decline in the Anglican Church and probably the Roman Catholic Church as well. But there is a massive growth in the sort of smaller house church movement, the evangelical charismatic churches. So there is a tremendous growth in people who are what I would call off the radar. So, so to me, the church is growing. And by the way, throughout 2,000 years of church history, the church has always grown when it's been persecuted. Just look at the early church, 300 AD. It grew when it was persecuted.
So, Neil, your point is, and I was asking this of a previous caller, your point is that people are practicing Christianity, but they're doing it in a different way rather than traipsing down to the local church on a Sunday morning. That's really the point you're making, isn't it?
Yeah, because many churches miss the point these days. I mean, I had to leave our local Anglican church because the church was being led by a transgender character, which didn't fit right with my theology, So we basically want we just want to follow the Bible principles.
Okay. No, Neil, I thank you. One observation I've got in London is that driving through South London at sort of mid-Sunday morning, what I've noticed are a lot of people, a lot of black people, I'm guessing mostly from West Indian backgrounds, women dressed up in the most amazing frocks and hats, and male adults and boys dressed in their Sunday best suits. And I may be wrong, but it seems to me in South London that the black churches, the black Christian churches, have had a really very good few years. I've noticed more people out on the streets on Sunday mornings going to that services than I have before. I could be right, I could be wrong. If you're a member of a black evangelical church, and if it is booming, please, 0345 60 60 973, tell me what's going on. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. It's 7:46. Is the Prime Minister's fierce condemnation of the National Trust and Cadbury's for not advertising Easter big enough for their egg hunts that are coming up in a few weeks' time, is it a sign that Christians feel seriously under attack? I think it's beyond doubt that the number of practicing Christians is diminishing. I've heard arguments tonight that say they're practicing in a different way. Maybe some are, but I really don't quite believe it. And that secularism has got a much stronger hold over our society than it ever had before. On Facebook, Catherine Goldsmith says, "We are too quick to consider others' feelings. We are a laughingstock. I'm not Christian, but as such, I abide by Christian values, and I object to other religions objecting to Christianity." Karen Gerard says, "Agreed about political correctness." Claire Caudry says, "I've always had Christian beliefs, but do not always attend church. Feel the Christian leaders seem to be afraid to speak out these days." Well, I think there's quite a lot of people, certainly in the Church of England, who felt with this Archbishop, and indeed with the previous Archbishop, they just weren't speaking for them. And Angela Yates says, it does seem that the media wants to dumb down Christianity in Britain, calling Christmas holiday season, taking the word Easter off chocolate eggs, etc. Well, some of that's true, some of it's not. But I think there is a general feeling that certainly local councils up and down the country are scared to talk about Christmas, scared perhaps to talk about Easter. I'm not quite sure why, but they do appear to be. I wonder whether Niall in Preston has all the answers for me. Niall, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Good evening.
Good evening. So what do you think? Is secularism on the march?
I think secularism and secularist values are rising. However, I don't think that's a bad thing, and I don't think Christianity is under any form of concentrated attack from secularism in the UK. You
don't? So no. Why was the Prime Minister so sort of itchy this morning about this and keen to respond as quickly as she did?
I feel that the Prime Minister comes from a different time in the UK, and she tends to while after what people refer to as the good old days. However, the UK we live in is forever changing. Even there was a NatSen survey quite recently that identified that more people, when surveyed about their religion, are identifying as nuns rather than Christians. So it's just the point that people are choosing not to believe anymore. And that's fine.
So actually, Niall, you're completely relaxed about this. You couldn't really care less which way this goes.
Well, I'm not religious. I do care about it to the extent where Christians are crying out that they're under attack, which I don't think is the case at all. A real attack might be any form of actual oppression, where perhaps they're told that they cannot have a Christian marriage ceremony and have that be legal, which has actually been the case for humanists in the past. Under David Cameron's government, the British Humanist Association forwarded the proposition to allow humanist marriages to be legalised legally in the same way that Christian marriages and Muslim marriages, Hindu marriages and all of that were. However, that was rejected. That's an actual possible form of repression, or even the repression that people from the LGBT plus community had before gay marriage was legalised.
I don't think Christians are arguing that they're being oppressed. I just think they're arguing they're rather under attack on all sides, and they're slightly scared in an age of political correctness for standing up for their beliefs. I think, Niall, that's really the answer. But, hey, Niall, you're saying the country's changing. Get with it. I want to put this question out there. Does that mean, folks, that when Queen Elizabeth II, and no one can live forever, although her mum made 101 despite quite an extraordinary lifestyle, at some point there will be a new king? Would that be the moment then? I'm asking you secularists, would that be the moment to say we change the British Constitution and that the monarch is no longer defender of the faith and head of the Church of England? I wonder what Arthur in East Finchley makes of that proposition. Arthur, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. A belated happy birthday from yesterday.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good man. I'm a UKIP member. Anyway, Christianity is under attack by secularism, be it Easter or otherwise. I'm thinking again to another season later in the year, at the end of the year, in fact, the Christmas nativity plays. How often have you seen in the newspapers, they're up in arms, the children are going to have the school's going to have a nativity play. Oh, terrible, terrible. Now, if we live in a multicultural society, Nigel, should we not be more tolerant? And as you said, the school assembly, when they used to have school, they'd start the curriculum, the day's curriculum, before lessons. If anybody was Jewish or non-Christian or whatever belief, and they didn't want to go in, they didn't want their child to attend the school assembly, they went into a classroom. Well, couldn't these people do this at Christmas? Why should the little children, I would think, even parents who are not practicing, as you say, you go sometimes, but I'm not knocking you, but at least you're Christian.
Well, everybody else does, Arthur. So
but I'm a Catholic. I go every week, and I go in the week because I read at Mass. But anyway, because I'm a pensioner. But anyway, many parents who are not practicing, they love to see their children dressed up as angels and, Virgin Mary and Joseph and Shepherd. Why are these people down on it? If they don't believe in it, they don't have to put their children in the classroom.
I think your point, Arthur, that in a multiracial or multicultural society, whichever you choose to say, that actually tolerance needs to be a two-way street, and that Christians need to have tolerance expressed towards them. Arthur, I agree with that point completely. And I'm going to ask Darren in Tooting. Darren, are you a practicing Christian or another atheist caller?
No. I'm a practicing Christian, Nigel.
Okay.
Let me just say something. The reason why I've phoned, and you're doing a good job, which I never thought you was going to do at the start. But anyway,
right, there you go.
But what I was going to say, right, is that sorry, I had to put that in there.
That's all right.
But what I was going to say is that in regards to what's happening, is Christians are seen as fair game. Christianity has no teeth, and at one stage it did have teeth. It used to bite back. So what you're finding is that in regards to the Easter, I would have preferred Theresa May to actually just say something about the religion, why Christians are practicing it, but it's almost like Christians are under attack because they have no defense. No one's prepared. Even the Christians that you had that have come up, I'm a Christian, right?
Yeah.
And even the Christians that have come up and have said what they've said, none of them have really had no bite, no bark. Let me tell you something.
Is it, Darren? Darren, is it a lack of leadership? Is that what the Christian churches are lacking? Really good, strong leadership?
Well, you could say that. However, even as a practicing Christian, I would say that, I mean, I've gone into mosque and I've watched the way that Muslims study, and that each Muslim can. This is the difference that I find with Islam. Just looking at those two, the comparisons, is that each Muslim is prepared and can stand up individually for their religion. They can argue their points intrinsically about anything of this nature. Was what you find with a lot of Christians that they can't. So if you started presenting a lot of Christians with the fact that Easter is a pagan festival, and even as a Christian, I recognise that.
Sure.
Lots of Christians wouldn't even know. They would be like, what do you mean? What do you mean a pagan festival? What's that got to do with it? Well, it's got a lot to do with it, because atheists then will say, you don't even know your religion. Because this is the reason why atheists always have a strong argument against Christians. And
one thing for certain, Darren, you can defend yourself, and I thank you for your call. Jill Peachy says, we already have a secular society. Farage would love us all to be hypocrites and pretend we are suddenly God-fearing Christians, easier to control. No, Jill, I'm not arguing that. I'm not even making an argument about being Christian. I'm really making an argument about our Judeo-Christian culture, about who we are as a country. And I do think actually those values are incredibly important today, regardless whether you believe or attend church or not. And I do think secularism is on the march, and it starts with our schools, and it goes right through to many Christians being afraid to speak their mind. Now, I'm here in Strasbourg, where tomorrow on parade will be Mr. Juncker, Mr. Barnier from the Commission, Mr. Verhofstadt from the Parliament, the A-team of the EU's negotiating team with the United Kingdom. They will set out their stall in a building not yards from me where I'm speaking. Will the sparks fly tomorrow morning in Strasbourg? Well, I'll be speaking as well. I have a feeling they may well. You'll find out more tomorrow evening about how exit from the EU is looking. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Back tomorrow from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive.